In today's video, we'll be going over the Cleric Alpha 1 preview and Ashes of Creation, continuing the series where we analyse each of the previews we've seen for the different classes. Now, the Cleric is the healer in Ashes of Creation. However, unlike in some other games, the Ashes of Creation development team have given the Cleric far more damage abilities than you might get in some other games. However, it's important to remember we've only been given the active skills that will be available for levels 1 to 10 of the Cleric, whereas with the other archetypes we were given the skills from 1 to 20, so we have less to analyse from this Cleric. So at a first glance of these Kalar Cleric archetypes, we can see that their armour seems to be mostly made out of cloth. It's a light armour, and this makes sense because, as we will go into further later in the video, a Cleric is not going to want to be getting into one-on-one combat. So they're going to have cloth armour, light armour that they can move around easily in. It's not going to be very heavy. They can focus on healing allies, buffing allies, debuffing enemies, and occasionally damaging enemies as well when the opportunity provides itself. We can also see that the Kalar armour has some gold to it, and this may be something that is unique to the Kalar aspect. It's important to remember that the different races will all have their own armour types and specialities, so it is possible, depending on the race you pick, the aesthetic for the Cleric armour is definitely going to be different, but it is possible that the armour stats, heaviness and buffs it provides will also be different depending on what race you're in. This could also be affected by what node type you're in, and of course, as you get into the late game, your armour will be impacted by the guild type and the religion you are a part of, but that is so far ahead that we won't be discussing that in this video. Restoration, enhancement and debilitation. This means they will be focusing on healing allies, making allies more powerful in combat, and debilitating enemies so they become weaker in combat. However, it's important to remember that the Ashes of Creation team have specifically made it so that you could solo a Cleric. You will have damaging abilities that you can use as a solo player, but the Cleric is more focused on towards healing allies and causing debuffs to enemies. So the level 1 skill that we see is called Castigation. This whips your foes into shape. Castigation lashes your target with holy energy, dealing direct damage. It also provides health regeneration and mana restoration for you and your surrounding allies. This is going to be a key ability that you're going to want to be using all the time because it's just a standard heal and damage ability. So you'll be able to hurt the enemies you're fighting while also healing yourself and your allies. Second ability is called Judgment. Wield the Divine Hammer of Justice. Judgment crushes your target with holy power, dealing direct damage and lowering their damage mitigation. So a fairly standard ability. You will stop the enemy from being able to block as much damage after this hit, and you'll deal some damage to them. This will be particularly useful against tanks if you're fighting in PvP, because one of the tank's main strengths is that they have high damage mitigation. So if you're able to lower that, you're going to make a tank way weaker. The third ability is called Hallowed Ground. You sanctify a spot in the name of light. Hallowed Ground fills the surrounding area with radiant energy, damaging enemies and healing allies. So this is much like the first ability, Castigation, except on a way bigger scale. So everyone caught in the middle of this circle in which you cast the spell, all enemies will take damage and all allies will be healed. So this is going to be amazing in big boss fights and raids, and also in sieges when there's a lot of players attacking you, or in like a caravan attack if you're defending or attacking a caravan. This is going to want to be a spell you want to use when you're fighting loads of enemies. The next ability is called Exorcism. The power of the Cleric compels you. Exorcism unleashes a bout of holy power that rips at your target's spirits, channeling damage over time. A divine energy blast damages nearby enemies at the end of the channel. This is going to be your best high damage ability when you start off with the Cleric. It's going to want to be the one you use to do the most amount of damage. However, you are vulnerable when casting it because there is a high amount of time where you're channeling it. So this ability would work really well if you were fighting with a tank, for example, and they were able to draw the surrounding enemies in, and then you could use Exorcism. It's also going to be very useful against high health enemies such as a boss fight, because you focus all of your damage on one enemy. There is a small amount of damage that gets done to nearby at the end, but the main focus is going to be on that one enemy. The next ability is called Damnation. The light giveth and the light taketh away. Damnation curses your target, dealing holy damage over time and lowering their damage output. Increasing this power also snares your target and extends its reach to enemies surrounding them. So, you do damage to your target, and much like some of the previous abilities, this is going to be especially effective against tanks in PvP, because not only will it lower the damage output, but again, it causes damage mitigation. So they will be able to block less damage as it continues. As well as this, it's going to be more useful in team fights if you're fighting lots of monsters, or if you're in a large PvP area such as a caravan fight or a siege, because it spreads to all the targets around them. The next ability is called Devotion. Give the gift of life. Devotion is a swift act that heals your target, adding a heal over time and a small area of healing around them as this power grows. This is just your very standard healing ability. You shoot your hand at the sky and you heal an enemy. However, as it levels up, this looks like it's quite a scalable ability, because they will not only have the initial health boost, but a consistent one, and all the allies around them as you level up even more. So this is one to keep in your back pocket even at the high level. The next ability is called Divine Sensor. Take aim and strike true. Divine Sensor launches a radiant spear at your target, dealing damage. Anytime that foe is attacked, the attacker has a chance to get healed. This is a great one to use if you are targeted during combat, or if there's a team fight and you're targeted, because what the cleric really wants to do is remain out of one-on-one combat. That's not where they thrive. They thrive at boosting other people and causing damage from afar. So if you use Divine Sensor on someone that starts getting close to you, each time they continue to then take damage, you're healed for any of the damage they might get to do to you while they're getting close. So they might think they've got one up on you, they got near the cleric, they start attacking you, and all of a sudden your health is just regenerating as fast as they're taking it away. The next ability is called Benediction. Blessings are better when they're shared. Benediction creates a chain of healing among your allies, increasing the number it affects as you grow stronger. Now, much like the earlier ability, this is a fairly standard healing ability, but it's going to want to be the one you use again in team fights. This is essential for in team fights. If you're in a raid or if you're in a large scale PvP area, you can have a chain heal that goes to all of the surrounding allies around you. I mean, they haven't said how many you can affect, but my guess is once you get to the very high levels, you could even affect potentially between 10 to 20 allied players, which would be an awesome healing ability. And the next and final ability is Resurrection. Where others may see a fallen friend, a cleric sees a divine opportunity. Resurrection brings an ally back from the grasp of death. This is by far the most powerful ability a cleric can use, being able to resurrect an ally. Because although death in Ashes of Creation hasn't been expanded upon a huge amount, we know it's more serious than just respawning somewhere. You can lose loads of your items, especially if it's a PvP death. So this cleric resurrection is going to be so powerful in any circumstance. If there's a one-on-one PvP battle and you're able to resurrect your friend, if you're in a siege and you can resurrect your friend, if you're in a raid and you can, you guessed it, resurrect your friend, they're going to be so grateful to you. It is such a powerful ability. Make sure you keep this one handy, and the timing on it should be well chosen. Finally, not relating to the abilities, it is important to remember that there is a potential for clerics to have advantages that others do not have in the Ashes of Creation world, because in Verra there are 7 different religions, and most likely if you are playing a cleric, you're going to have certain opportunities in the religion you follow that others might not have. So remember this when picking your class. So to sum up, if you're playing a cleric, you're going to have the most advantageous way of playing if you're playing with some friends, because clerics thrive when they're able to heal their enemies and debuff the attackers that the enemies are defending against, or the enemies that the allies are attacking against. So you can still play a cleric solo, but you're going to have a way more fun time if you can find a friend or two to play with in Ashes of Creation. If you don't know anyone that's playing Ashes of Creation, don't worry. There are so many public Discord groups and Reddit groups for people who want to get together and form groups or guilds within the game when it first becomes available. As well as this, it's important to remember that the cleric's greatest strength is when they're fighting with a tank, because they are able to heal the tank and make them even more powerful than they already are, as well as debuffing the enemies that the tank is attacking against. However, They are also a tank's biggest weakness if they're fighting against a tank. The last thing a tank wants to see in PvP is an enemy cleric that's got their sights on them, because the tank's main strength is all the buffs they get during combat, and the cleric's main strength is debuffing enemies, so they can essentially make a tank worthless in combat if the cleric is powerful enough. So remember this: if you're a cleric, you want to be playing with a tank, and you're going to want to be targeting the enemy tanks if you're in PvP. Anyway, that's everything I could possibly find out about the cleric archetype. If you haven't already subscribed, do that now. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and have an amazing day.